everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am Diane Perillo, the Director of Volunteer Engagement with Save the Children, and along with my co-host Carolyn Johnson, Rotary International's Chair of LitRag, the Literacy Rotary Action Group, and Yarmouth, Maine Rotary member, we'd like to welcome you to the session. This is the fourth and last webinar in our Together We Read partnership series. If you've been with us all along, thank you for your commitment to joining us in our webinars. If you're joining us today for the first time, thank you so much. We have a little bit of a different format today. So in the past, we've had presentations where we've presented to you, but today we're doing something different. Our discussion is going to be more of a conversation where we have a panel of early learning, early literacy, and early childhood education experts in their field who are going to share with us their insights and stories on how to advocate for early childhood education. So before we get started, just a quick brief reminder, if you have questions during our conversation today, please utilize the chat box and enter them in. We will answer them as best as we can throughout the session. If we don't get to those, we'll be sure to respond after today's webinar and respond to everybody with those questions and our responses to that. So let's just get started and jump right in. It is with great pleasure that I introduce to you a distinguished keynote speaker that we have today. Dr. Kathy Hirsh-Pasek is joining us. She is going to share with us her life's work in early language development and speak a little bit about why not all screen time is the same. Dr. Pasek is an award-winning author, lecturer, and educator with over 13 books and 200 publications to her credit. As she is currently the Stanley and Deborah Lefkowitz Faculty Fellow in Psychology at Temple University, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, and the director of Temple University's Infant Language Laboratory. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kathy Hirsh-Pasek to our discussion this afternoon.
So today, let's look at having the conversation, building blocks for lifelong literacy. And I focus on literacy and language today only because if I were to deal with the whole field of early learning, well, you'd be quite overwhelmed. And it turns out that early language is the single best predictor of kids' social skills, language skills, math skills, when they're going to enter into formal schooling. So let's just take a closer look. In the United States, the National Assessment of Educational Progress reports that more than 80% of the third graders from low-income families will not be reading at third grade in third grade. And at least half of that school achievement gap between the kids who have more means and those who are from under-resourced environments actually starts before kindergarten. Yes, early education. The New York Times reported reading scores on national exam decline in half of the states. And this was just pre-COVID that we looked at this. Yet, Hollis Scarborough, a very famous researcher in early literacy and language development, shows us that we can't even think of literacy as one thing. You think of it, and I love this image, as a rope that has many, many strands to it. And when we normally think of what we need to do in early childhood to build literacy, some of us feel a little bit left out. Some of us feel like, well, I don't know how to teach phonological awareness. I don't know how to teach code skills. I don't know how to teach sight recognition. But we forget that critical to learning to read is also background knowledge, learning about the world, vocabulary, just talking about different things, language structures. How do we learn to say things in so many different ways? In fact, how does a child ever learn language and sound so sophisticated even before she can learn how to tie her shoes? Verbal reasoning, and even the knowledge that this is where you turn the page and this is where the next word comes. They may not know what it says, but they're understanding basic facts of literacy. In her terms, most of the curricular attempts to remedy the problem focus on what she calls code skills or drill and kill on vocabulary. And if you look at the literature out there, a review of 31 of the well-cited interventions tell us that just focusing on these code skills, while important, aren't going to be enough. When you have a big analysis of all the different studies, for example, it turns out that we account for a very small percent of kids' reading achievement. When we look at all those studies put together, if all they did was to focus on code skills. So maybe, just maybe, we should be looking at whether kids understand language and how rich that language is. Even if, and in my house this is true, I had one son who really wanted to talk about slugs. I can't think of anything less interesting to me than talking about the slugs that are under the rocks. But he wanted to talk about them, and he was 3, or should I say 3, and we were going to have a conversation. So the scientific data show us that both directly teaching about code skills and indirect relationships, the language relationships, are really what's going to help budding readers, budding literacy. Indeed, we did one study, a secondary analysis of a study I was involved in called the NICHD Child Care Study. And it was a big study with 1,364 children. And we followed them from birth all the way through until they were in their 20s. And we found out that their language skills early on were maybe the most important thing that we could work on in early education. In fact, these language skills, when we looked at them at age 4, predicted how well the kids were going to do in school when they were in grades 3 and grades 5. And if we look at the brain, we know why. Here is a piece of work that was, or actually even a picture that was given to me by Stan Dehaene, one of the leading researchers in France right now, and somebody who is working with the Ministry of Education to enhance all education in the country of France right now. And here's what I want you to notice, that you have language areas and you have areas in the visual cortex back here. So that's interesting. Here are the language areas, and here is where we get the visual areas, and they meet in this green spot right here, which is called the visual word form area. And it's in that box that culture helped us create the thing we call literacy. So if you don't have the strong language skills, then I can't link them to the visual skills and create strong readers. Further, mountains of data tell us that children from under-resourced environments have poorer general language skills than those from more privileged homes. So that is giving us a hint. And that hint first came out in a very well-cited piece by Hart and Risley that came out in 1995. It was called Meaningful Differences in the Everyday Experience of Young Children. Oh, it created quite a stir. It was on the desk of every congressperson. And while it might not have been as culturally sensitive as it needs to be, it made a very important point. And here is that point. And I was only with 40 kids, so we can criticize it up the kazoo. But other studies have come to reaffirm this. Look at the difference in the parents who are well-educated parents and from very resourced environments, and how much they talk to their kids at 48 months compared to those with slightly less education and less resources. Look again what happens at 36 months. Look at 24 months. Look at even at 12 months. They predicted that by 48 months, the number of words heard by hour in each group was in what they called, I hate these names, the welfare group 616, the working class 1,251, and in what they called the professional. Again, dump the names. It's what they came up with, but I hate them, okay? The point is that in what they called the professional group, you are hearing more than 3 times the number of words past your ears. That's kind of critical. And that means that if this is happening at 12 months, 24, 36, 48, if we don't have strong early education programs, we cannot make up for this. Leads us to ask, well, why does that matter? It matters because the vocabulary and the number of early words here really relates later to what we're going to call their IQ scores, to the way they're going to understand the literature later, to what they're going to do with the letter sound correspondence, to even understanding the words when you translate it in 1 second of reading. These have consequences. So today I want to talk to you about what we can do about it. And I want to offer you 6 evidence-based principles of language learning that support language and thereby support reading. And then I want to show you the implications and the outreach. Now, I distilled from the literature, and I was liberal in doing so. What I'm about to show you is thousands and thousands of research papers that you probably don't want to read because they're jargon-filled. And I was just on the phone a half hour ago with somebody who said, can't you scientists use English? So instead, I'm going to try to use English instead of more of the fancy terms and just suggest 6 principles of language learning that can enhance language in your home, that can enhance language in the way we design apps, that can enhance language in the way we do TV programs, that can enhance language in the classroom. And here they are. 6 simple principles, but boy, do they have a lot of deep research behind them. Now, my rule for research is if your grandmother says this is ridiculous, dump it. And if your grandmother said, well, that's interesting, stick with it. Or we already knew that, stick with it. Principle 1, children learn what they hear most. I literally heard from Red Book one year. They said, oh, children are swearing so much. It's horrible. It's horrible. What are we going to do about the children swearing? I said, well, if they don't hear swearing, they won't swear. And it turns out that we can actually measure the amount of language the young children are hearing and measure at the other end just how much they are getting from what they hear. Now, that's not overheard speech. So when you're on the computer during COVID having your business meeting and your child's playing in the background, that's not going to do it. It has to be something, number 2, that interests them for events and things that interest them, like my 3-year-old slug story. The most important one is here, principle 3, and we're doing a lot of research here. Interactive and responsive environments build language learning. Interactive and responsive. Do you know that at 10 weeks of age, our babies can already go in a back and forth conversation? Ka, ka. And we're talking to them and we're saying, well, they don't really understand it. Why should we talk to them? Because they're understanding conversation even at that early age. That means it's really worth having those conversations. And when we have conversations, we ask questions, we build curiosity, and notice that a lot of the screen time, say FaceTime and some other wonderful platforms I've seen, I just saw a beautiful one called Caribou. In those, we have a back and forth. But in most of our screen time, we do not. It talks at us, not with us. Principle number 4. Children learn best in meaningful contexts. Principle number 5, they need to hear diverse language. I want you to go to those meaningful contexts and listen to the diversity of the language you use when you are playing with blocks with your child. Could you put the green one on top of the red one? Oh, let's twist it this way and make a castle. When we do that and we talk about on top of, underneath, through, in, out, and use spatial language, the research says that you're actually preparing your children for later STEM learning in science, technology, engineering, and math. And finally, it's not about lists of vocabulary words. You didn't like to learn them when you were little, and you probably don't like them as a kid. But using those words in sentences when you have the conversation, That's what's really important and gets you going. Now I want to move to the second part of my talk, just to whet your appetite. What are the implications of those 6 principles for you? Well, let me give you a practical one. It came from the Foundation for Child Development in 2009, and it's always been a Kathy favorite. 3 mothers and an eggplant is what it was called. And here's the way it goes. You are in the supermarket with your young child, and your child sees the weird purple thing called an eggplant. You want to get out of the supermarket as quickly as possible. And so when your child says, "What's that?" you say, "Oh, let's move on." Or don't even answer. Then there's another mother who says, "Well, it's an eggplant. You know, eggplants are pretty cool. We can make stuff out of them. I mean, we could make eggplant parmesan. Would you like us to weigh the eggplant and get the eggplant? We can, you know. And then we can take it home and make something interesting." Well, there's a big difference in what you just heard in Mother 1 and in Mother 3. Let's just look. Children learn what they hear most. Yeah, Mother 3's got it, not Mother 1. She just left the scene. Children learn the words for things that interest them. Yeah, Mother 3, not so much. She just said it for Mother 1. Interactive and responsive environments. Oh yeah, they had a whole conversation. Children learn best when it's meaningful. It's the supermarket. Children need to hear diverse examples. Yeah, you're hearing. You just even heard it was a vegetable and that you could make cool things with it. And vocabulary and grammar go together. I didn't just say eggplant, eggplant. The eggplant is a purple vegetable that you can buy in a supermarket. Eggplant. I said something about it. Yeah, Mother 3, not so much Mother 1. So the challenge for all of us in early childhood education is, how do we bring what Mom 1 intuitively does, or doesn't intuitively do, to Mom 3? That's our challenge at home, in apps, in screen time, and in the classroom. We need to change the curve over time by helping our children start a trajectory that's going to give them mental exercise early in life. And I'm going to give you 3 examples of this from research in our own lab, and then open it up to the panel. First at the family level, second at the classroom level, and third at the community level. Family level. And here's my beautiful team that worked with me. Amy Pace, Rebecca Alpert, Rufan Luo. Now they are professors in their own right after leaving the lab. And Lillian Masick will be next year. With a lot of other people from University of Texas, University of Georgia, University of Delaware, we came up with a community-based participatory research, which means something different than most scientists do. We asked the parents first. We went in and learned about their life and how they would apply this. And we went in and then worked with home visitors to design something to help people learn these particular principles. Why call it duet? Because you don't talk at people. It's like singing a duet, and it takes both of you. So the duet mission was to strengthen what we call the Developing Communicative Foundation, to enhance and predict language learning and school readiness outcomes for young children by doing it early, by reaching down into early education. Our goals to foster awareness and knowledge so parents even knew that at 10 weeks you could have the conversation, to empower caregivers to understand they really are not just the first teachers, but the first parents, to have those interactions with young children, increase the quality and quantity of the interactions, and thereby improve all the outcomes that we're looking for. We literally hand drew these animations. What are you pointing at, Ashley? Oatmeal. You're right, Ashley. They're all oatmeal. Oatmeal has so many different flavors. Which one do you want? Notice it was meaningful, of interest to the kid. And in this duet project, we did one more thing. You can actually go on to it and look at some of the examples in the link below. but we had the older brother in the family speak to, look what mom just did. Thanks, mom. You did a great job of answering what Ashley wanted to know. And our preliminary findings are that even with a very low income sample, 27 out of 41 were earning less than $25,000 a year. Helping parents recognize their worth made a difference. And we did it in 6 classrooms too. And we measured their language outcomes, and voila, it seemed to work. Making people aware of what they can do can make all the difference in early childhood. I was then asked to write the California preschool curriculum, and it allowed us to share these principles in the classroom. And they're still using these principles as they roll out early education. Our research is also testing whether we can enhance vocabulary through reading and playful dialogue in classrooms. Yes, we had the children do circle time and they read Knight and the Dragon. And then they were either in a free play, a directed play, or what we call a guided play condition. We gave them the toys. We gave them the knight. We gave them the dragon. We either let them play on their own, or we said, wow, what would you like to do with the knight and dragon that can allow them to gallop along, using fancy vocab words? Or we told them exactly what to say in a more guided environment. And what we found is that just giving them the toys wasn't enough. But when we directed them just a little bit, like I call it bowling with bumpers, that these kids did better in these conditions than they did in the free play conditions. And we've written that up. It's interesting that in play, we reinforce the vocabulary. And in fact, in a recent dissertation that came out of Australia, we talk more when we play with our children, when we have back and forth conversations. And this is true, whether you're learning one language or you're learning 2 languages. And notice, please notice, that most of the way screen time is designed today is to not allow you to have that back and forth. Just reinforcing by having hands clapping and people cheering is not having a conversation. In FaceTime, in Zoom, in Caribou, we have the conversation. So we're creating opportunities for more talk in the community settings themselves. And I thought I'd just give you a preview of some of the work that we're doing. Can we change the supermarket? We went in to under-resourced areas. We literally put up signs to prompt conversations, and by gosh, we got a 33% increase in those conversations when we had the signs up in the supermarket than when we had the signs down. And that was generally true when we put them up in under-resourced areas, not when we put them up in areas where you had that mom who was discussing the eggplant. A second one was what we called urban thingscape. We literally transformed a bus stop. And at the bus stop with Itai Palti and Brenna Hossinger-Das, we put in a puzzle right next to a bench so that you could start talking about the alignment of the lines. And you could have kids putting together puzzles who don't have puzzles in their own homes or blocks in their own homes. We had 4 different environments that we created at the bus stop. We looked at 280 people who came to that bus stop, and we looked at parent-child interaction. And I'm thrilled to tell you that what went on the puzzles, it's what the community wanted in that space. Where the space was, what the community asked for in that space. And we get a 38% hike in conversations in families by changing what a bus stop looks like. Example 3, Parkopolis, it's our life-size board game. And this is with Andres Bustamante. And here's Andres, who's now a professor at University of California at Irvine. What we did is we even changed the dice. Look here at our new dice. Notice that it has fractions, not 1 to 6 and 1 to 6. Oh my gosh, we're talking fractions. You can move half spaces. You can have cards and tell kids how far to move. You can create a new kind of hopscotch that helps them with impulse control, a shape zone that has them talking about triangles and squares. How easy is that to create shape zones out on the sidewalks? And again, we get a huge increase in Parkopolis where we literally saw more people using math language and talking about how far they move, how far they jump in a big ruler, etc. And we've just created with Andres Fraction Ball, where kids played fraction games on a normal everyday basketball court that we just repainted. Now the 3-point line's a 4-4, and then you move in and you get a 3/4, and then you get a half, and then you get a quarter. How many points can you get? Or could you add your numbers up to 5 without going over? The project is designed to use our science to create more conversations through early childhood, 0 to 8, with parents, and to just make it work in a lot of different neighborhoods around the world. We're also measuring it with a new measurement tool that we call the quills. It's available for bilingual and monolingual English and English Spanish. And in fact, just asking kids about how they do in vocabulary, in grammar for the 3s, the 4s, the 5s, and a new test about to come out with 2-year-olds. We can find out how well they do in questions like this. Show me the hinge. Can you find the hinge? Now I'm going to make it a little harder. The FEP is blue. Can you find the FEP? See if you can show me another FEP. Did you all get it? And on the right, it's who's kissing the baby with an animation. The quills is working. It's showing us beautiful progressions on language growth. 673 kids tested. And there are significant differences by whether you're in an under-resourced or an over-resourced environment. The bilingual test shows you that products are linked within and across languages, how well you learn. And processes, how you learn, is linked within language, but not across. And the process, how well you learn, is across languages like Spanish and English. So the bottom line, early education matters. It matters because we're giving children the opportunities they might not otherwise have. And even for children from more resourced environments, giving us the chance to get off some of the screens and have a conversation with our children, giving us a chance to build better screen interactions where we can have those social interactions will be important for exercising all 6 of the principles. And these 6 principles turn out to be precisely the way you learn language. And language turns out to be precisely the single best predictor of how you're going to do later in formal school and beyond. So as a starting point, we have to start the interventions early and create environments that encourage people to engage in conversations. That's the single best way for all of us to help all children thrive over time. That's what you can do to make a difference. Talk with, not talk at. Play, play, play. And get the community involved in having conversations. And I just want to thank the team that helped made this possible. Early education is where it's at. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Kathy. That conversation and that presentation was just simply amazing, and so many great ideas and things to work off of. Let's continue that conversation and begin with introductions of our panel. Deborah, would you like to get started, please?
Absolutely. So good to be with all of you. My name is Deborah DePauli. I am the state manager in South Carolina for Save the Children Action Network. I worked in public education for 30 years before making this career transition about 2 years ago to the advocacy space. And I'm so excited to share with you today what advocacy is and how you can get involved.
Thanks, Deborah. Dr. Crystal Campbell, Would you please introduce yourself?
Thank you so much, Diane. It's great being here. Greetings to all of you from the great state of South Carolina. I'm Crystal Campbell. I'm the executive director for an organization, a nonprofit called Dorchester County First Steps. There are 46 First Steps offices in the state of South Carolina. I work in the town of Somerville, not in the Tri-County of Berkeley, Charleston, and Dorchester counties. First Steps is a nonprofit organization working with families with children birth to age 5 as we prepare them for school success. Nice to be here with you today.
Thank you, Crystal. Mary Jo.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Jo Jean-Francois, and I am the Area of Focus Manager for Rotary International with our basic education and literacy area of focus. I've been with Rotary now for about 7.5 years, and I have been working in education for, almost 15 years now. So I'm very pleased to be here with all of you today and looking forward to having this exciting conversation.
Thanks so much, Mary Jo. And of course, Carolyn.
Thanks, Diane. It's great to be here and great to be with so many talented educators. I'm Carolyn Johnson. I'm a member of Yarmouth Rotary in Maine. I'm an educator. I was an elementary school teacher and then principal for many years. And then I've spent the last 12 years actually working on professional development programs for literacy education in Guatemala. I'm chair of LitRag currently, and I'm also the liaison to Save the Children for the Together We Read partnership.
Thank you so much, Carolyn, and thank you, everyone. So the format for our conversation is just that, to have a conversation. So to all our panelists, if you feel you'll want to add at any point in the conversation, please just jump in, because there's so much good information to share. So let's just get started. In Dr. Hirsh-Pasek's conversation, one of the things that resonated most with me when in the question or one of the points that she raised, and she said, quote unquote, if we don't have strong early education programs, we cannot make up for this, right? And in talking about the importance of the early language and early literacy skills and just hearing those words. And you know what, Save the Children, we work in rural areas because access to that language doesn't happen. Poverty in rural areas is silent. So if we don't have strong early childhood education programs, so what does this mean? So Crystal, do you want to start with that? Why is advocating for early childhood education so important?
It is, next to being a parent, it is the most important thing we can do for our children. Our children are going to be the strength and the foundation of what happens in our world. And all of the research points to the fact that we need to be putting some more emphasis in what happens in early childhood. The brain connectivity, everything we need to learn, everything we needed to learn, as Fulgram said, happens in kindergarten. Therefore, and it's wonderful, but it's not just kindergarten. It's from birth until then. I would even go as far as connections being made in utero. We have to make sure that the health and the welfare and the care of our children is number one in our country. We have to advocate for high quality teachers. We have to advocate for high quality programs. And we have to make sure, as Dr. Hirsch was saying, and I was so excited about it, is that language is important. Our brains were not designed for reading. Our brains were designed for language. But can we learn to read? Of course, if the right conditions are put, if the connections are made in the brain that need to happen. And we do that by that rich language, the rich literature that we need to be sharing with our families and parents needing to do that. It's the ABCs, the 1, 2, 3s, the sounds and all that kind of stuff. That's just a vehicle by which we get there. The foundation of it is language. The foundation of it is vocabulary, making sure that we have rich conversations with our children, that we're talking with them rather than at them. And with our organization, Dorchester County First Steps, and all the first steps in our state, we put at the front helping families make those kinds of decisions. We're helping them know what to do and how they need to do it with our home visitation models, with our summer programs to have bridged the gap, with our 4K programming. That the whole focus is to make a rich, wonderful foundation for our children birth to age 5. And not so much preparing them or our children for school, but preparing our environment for the children. Because the children bring their A game. Our babies are born, they have got their act together. They are being kids, and they do it quite well. It is the adults and the people in the environment that should be making sure that the environment is ready for the child, as opposed to the child being ready for the environment. So I'm to take that wonderful kid that walks through the door, who's had it or who has not had those experiences, and make those experiences happen. And what I'm seeing, though, is quite the opposite. And we're not spending the time providing the experiences that our children need and must have. I'm going to get off my soapbox now and let somebody else talk.
Crystal, I think you said one thing that was really, that I think is really true, is that we need to have quality education or quality programs for our children and for families. But we also need to make sure they're accessible. And I think that for our family,
Definitely.
Been one of the challenges. We live in a childcare desert, which means there are more children who have needs for childcare, early childhood childcare, than we have access to. And so, even for myself, obviously education, I'm an education manager. It's critically important to my family that my children are engaged in learning from a young age. But even with my kids, with my oldest, I didn't realize it was going to be so hard to get her into a early childcare program. And so, the first new parent, you learn every time you have more. So with my next two, I had them on waiting lists when I was 12 weeks pregnant, to go to an early childcare center. But if you don't know these things, then you miss out. And I think that, it's so overwhelming for parents as we are, like you said, in utero kids maybe start learning these things. And that's a lot of pressure, and especially in this day and age. And so I think that we really rely on our community to advocate for these things too. It's not just about having quality programs with wonderful teachers, but it's also about being able to access them. And if you don't have those programs available to you, how can you be advocating for your fellow community members in order for that not to be a problem? Because that's not something, parents even start to think about right away when they get pregnant, and they really shouldn't have to be thinking about that as the first thing that happens when they, find out they have a viable pregnancy is, oh, where can I have my child go to an early child care center?
You're absolutely right, Mary Jo. And again, our organization works with the community as well, and that's the exciting part. And we, especially in the Tri-County area, we have a group. We're called the Tri-County Play. It's based on the Build out of Boston. And the idea behind it is to make sure that our families have access, not just know about it, but actually can go to it, be out there in the parks and recreation areas, to our museums, to our libraries, providing the transportation and or bringing those things to them within the community, letting parents know what to look for when they go to a child care. How do you decide which child care to put your child in if you can find a child care? And we do need more. And that's where I think our government and the people around us, and the focus should be on making sure that there are resources out there. If COVID hadn't taught us anything other than how, trying to get rid of it, but if nothing else has been taught through this process, it should be that the most essential, there are different levels of essential, and the medical profession is important. I'm not knocking that. But without childcare and quality care for the children, even those most essential people in the medical field would not have been able to do their job adequately if they're concerned about where their children are going to be. So we need to make sure that we put a heavier emphasis on our children in early childhood. Thank you.
I would agree with what you were saying, Crystal. It's hard to find a benefit or a silver lining with COVID-19. But if one thing has happened, it has revealed how essential early care and education really is. You go back to our political debates 4 years ago, you didn't hear congressional candidates, presidential candidates talking about early education, about childcare. It just wasn't on the radar. And the pandemic has put it front and center for all of us. Some of us have children, all of us know someone who has children, and it has disrupted our lives in just a way we couldn't even imagine. Crystal's laughing because we're always on calls together where one of our children or grandchildren are coming into the room and saying, Mom, I just have one question. I just have one question. So this has really given us an opportunity to advocate for robust investment in early education programs, those kinds of programs that offer what we call wraparound services, where it's not simply a place where the child is dropped off at 8 o'clock in the morning and picked up at 5:30, but it's a place where the family can find resources for housing, for food insecurity, for maybe job training, all these community resources that are available, but that sometimes families don't know about. So I would say that yes, we are struggling and we are suffering with this pandemic, but this has given us a phenomenal opportunity to really bring early education forward in the advocacy realm.
I would also add to that in advocacy is also building awareness. When Dr. Hirsh-Pasek was talking about different activities that parents can do, parents and caregivers can do with children, when in a different day, in a different time, in different generations, moms were home with their children, and when we did the laundry or we cooked or we did other things, we talked with our kids. But some of those skills, some of that knowledge has been lost through the generations because we're busy. Both parents work, there's more going on. And I think doing a bit of a reset and building that awareness of going to the grocery store and talking about the eggplant or talking about the other things that we see, that's a different way of advocating. So that parents are aware of those skills that over generations sometimes have become lost.
One thing that I love about Carolyn, I love that you brought this up, because one thing that I love about Rotary is just the voice that Rotarians have and the ability to use that voice within their community. And this is it's a global voice, right? So it's not just in the United States, it's not just in affluent communities. I mean, I work with Rotarians every single day that are using their voice to help people in their community that may not have the access to the government or may not have access to people who are listening and can make policy decisions or any types of decisions that can affect or impact their lives. And so it's so great to know that we have Rotarians that can do these sorts of things. And, I think that as parents or as teachers, we know what our job is, right? Our job is to work with those little minds and to mold them and to teach them and to really help them to be good people on top of it, right? It's not just about learning, it's turning them into good people. But then it gives me comfort to know that we also have networks of people like Rotarians and like SCAN who are out there working on our behalf so that that doesn't all have to fall on us. And I'm really proud of the work that Rotary does in the advocacy space and in our, what we have been able to do over the years. And I think that, one of the things that I love about what you said, Carolyn, is that you can think about advocacy in different ways. It's not just going and standing in front of the Capitol with signs and protesting or meeting with your congressperson. But it's learning what the challenges are in your community, talking about those challenges with other people. When I'm together with my other mom friends, all we do is talk about where our kids are going to school, if we're happy with the way the teacher's communicating, And I think that those small steps are just as important in advocacy as other steps are too. But you have to find where you're comfortable with and really try to advocate on behalf of these little people that are, like Crystal said, they're ready to take on the world. They show up every day. And what are we doing on their behalf to make sure that they're getting the services that they really need?
Exactly.
So Mary Jo, thank you. And you bring up a good point, and I think that's why we're here today. Advocacy is a very scary word, and it's how do we take the mystery out of how to be an advocate? And so, what does that mean? So, if I were sitting in the audience today and I'm listening in on this call, and I think loud and clear we hear why, we know why it's important. But what can I do? What can I do as an individual? What can I do as part of a group, as a Rotarian, through SCAN? I'll start, Deborah, you want to take this first and just kind of share how simple an advocacy effort for early childhood education can be.
Absolutely. So, like I said, I was a public school teacher and then a public school administrator for many, many years. And kind of what Mary Jo was saying, I was always advocating for public education. The last 10 years of my career was focused specifically on early education. So everywhere I went, I was having conversations with people about how important it was. But when I was first introduced to SCAN, Save the Children Action Network, the idea that I would formalize that advocacy was kind of daunting to me. Like, oh, I wouldn't know what to say. I wouldn't even know who to call. Who is my state representative after all? I'm embarrassed to say that, but I'm not even sure who that person is. Let me look that up. And what I learned as I got involved, first as a volunteer and then as an employee with SCAN, there are so many things that we can all do. And it starts with the simplest, smallest step. One of the things I'm always encouraging people to do is to visit our website, SaveTheChildrenActionNetwork.org. And there are some tools there, things you can do easily. Send an email to a representative. If you're a person who likes to tweet, then look at different ways that you can use your Twitter account to bring these super important issues to the attention of your representatives. There are things you can do in the community. Maybe you can take a picture of yourself on the way to the polls and post it on your social media account and say, I'm keeping children in mind as I go to the polls this November 3rd. I want to be sure that everyone I'm voting for is prioritizing children and their needs. Those kinds of messages in your community and to your representatives. I think that Crystal can speak to this as well, because Crystal is also a lifelong educator. And as you guys have seen, she is passionate. So when I met Crystal about 2 years ago, we sat down at a restaurant and I kind of talked to her about what we were doing. She's like, okay, I'm in. Okay, you need to tell me what to do. And oh my goodness, has she done it? So I'm going to let Crystal share with what her experience has been like as a volunteer advocate.
I got to tell you, I was scared. I didn't know what to do or how to do it, but thanks to Deborah, she's a great teacher, and she also, I think, sized me up a little bit and said, all I got to do is throw her into the water and she's either going to sink or she's going to swim. And that's what she did. And I found that it wasn't as scary as I thought. All of these years, I couldn't talk to a legislator or a representative. They were kind of big in my eyes and that kind of thing. And reality says, nope, these are men and women just like me. And just like we're talking here today, I can talk to them and tell them how I'm feeling about certain things. And as a constituent, they need to listen to me. So Deborah has helped me write letters to the editor. I have I just finished some postcards just yesterday to get the postcards out about how children matter and please think about them when you're voting. It was an opportunity to send letters to our senators and via email and on the social media. it turned out not to be as difficult as I thought it would be. It's just a matter of taking that step. And for those listening to our panel discussion today, one of the things that I would tell them to do is to connect. Connect with SCAN, connect with Deborah if you're in South Carolina, connect with Mary Jo with the Rotary, you know, be a part, get involved in the community. And then, you know, the process becomes a little bit easier. And be a light for our children. If you're concerned about our children, then be that light, be that voice, because they're little and, you know, they're not talking about it. We need to talk for them. We are to protect our children, and it's our obligation, morally and ethically, to make sure that we give our children the best beginning that they can possibly have. And I'm going to stop now.
I take it back to what can Rotarians do and how can Rotary be involved. I think one of the best things we can do, or first starting points that we can have, is bring speakers into our clubs to talk about the need and talk about the programs that are out there and talk about the programs that aren't out there. Have your local kindergarten teachers or early childhood specialists come in and talk to your Rotary Club, because people kind of know things intuitively, but until they really understand and see the actual situation, they're not going to act on it and they're not going to do anything. And then by building awareness and building better understanding of what the situation is, then talk to the other Rotary clubs in your area and build a coalition of Rotarians that are interested in early childhood education to see what you can do together. If there's 45 people in your Rotary Club, there might be 2 or 3 that are interested in this topic, and others that are doing other good things. So go out and start talking to other clubs, to other Rotarians in other areas, and start working together to see what's needed in your community. Through the partnership with Together We Read, we've developed a community roadmap on how to take action and how to start doing a community assessment. And that's a really great tool to help Rotarians know where to start and know who to start talking to.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, you know, Rotary's success is so easily demonstrated by our work in polio that we've done over the years. I think that, you know, from something that started as some volunteers that were interested in something in the 70s to where it's come today, and what we've seen Rotarians do over the years with, you know, World Polio Day, partnering with the World Health Organization, partnering with the Gates Foundation, the funds that have been raised, the messages that have been sent, and the lives that have really been changed as a result of Rotarians' hard work, it's something that we can't look past. I mean, we have a voice in all of this. And I think that, you know, one of the things that really moves me when I hear Rotarians talk about their work in polio and their work with Rotary is their why. You know, why are you doing it? Why? And I would challenge them to find their why when it comes to early childhood education and use that why. And it doesn't have to be because you have grandkids or you had children or you know people with children. Maybe it's because you're a business owner and you're losing part of your workforce because they have to stay home and take care of their kids because they can't, you know, enroll them in childcare. And, you know, I would really encourage you to find your why and then share your why also as you're learning more about your own community, because those stories are really moving. And as Crystal said, you know, talking to your legislators, talking to people who have some power, so to say, wouldn't have it without our voices, right? And so I think that, you know, doesn't have to be a partisan issue or a political issue. It's a human dignity issue, and it's making sure that we are giving every single child a chance to thrive. It falls really within almost all of our causes at Rotary that we care about. And I think that, you know, in addition to the fact that you're going to be helping children today, you're building our tomorrow for what our world is going to look like. And so I think that Rotarians certainly have a voice in the space. And just like we did in polio, we can use it and make a humongous difference.
Absolutely, Mary Jo. And whenever I have the chance to present, whether it's to a Rotary Club or a university class or a civic group, I always like to touch on both sides of the early education impact. Of course, we're having incredible impact on those individual children and their families and the educational trajectory of their future. That cannot be overstated. That is so important. The flip side of it, though, is what you mentioned, Mary Jo, the financial impact. When we are able to work with families in those crucial years when their children are young and their brains are developing, we set them up for success so that they don't need as much special education help. They're not quite as likely to repeat a grade, and that of course costs thousands of dollars to our school system. They're less likely to end up with an addiction problem throughout their life. They're less likely to drop out of high school and not be able to produce as a contributing member of our community. There are so many financial reasons to invest in early education. So just what you're saying, we are advocating with lawmakers based on both of those arguments, but also business owners. And again, COVID-19 has shown us, if I have an organization, if I have a business that employs 150 people, but 65 of them can't show up because they can't find childcare, that's going to crush my business. So I find that regardless of who you're talking to and regardless of their professional background, their personal background, it is a completely nonpartisan issue. One person may come to the table motivated by certain reasons, and another person may come to the table motivated by other reasons. But we all agree that these are the most crucial years, and the investments during these years will have an impact literally for decades to come throughout that child's life.
That was a great discussion, and I want to thank all of our panelists for your time, for the dedication to what you do career-wise and volunteer-wise every day to be the voice for our children. And if I could add one last thing, 2 years ago when this partnership between Save the Children and Rotary started, we knew early on that one of the biggest ways in which both organizations can have an impact on early childhood education and the importance of early learning was through advocacy. And just the combination of both of our organizations, the power of Rotary's community is unparalleled by any other. And some of the programs that Save the Children has in quality early childhood education, in teaching parents that they are their child's first teacher, and in advocacy for early childhood education, together we can really make a huge difference. So thank you all so much for your time. To our panelists, to our participants, we will follow up with questions should they have not been answered today, and we'll certainly follow up with the roadmap, some contact information, if you have questions or if you want to ask more or learn more. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Thanks.